Hello, everyone coming in. We'll get started in a few moments. We'll get everyone a chance to settle in for our presentation tonight on orchids. If you haven't been on Zoom before, you are not going to be able to see your face. You'll probably see me right now, and then the presentation tile. There's a place on the bottom that you can put for chat or questions, Q&A. You can put your questions down there. If you have technical questions and you're having trouble, I can try and help you. Or if you have questions throughout the program, you can put down in there your questions. I like to read the questions at the end and give us a few minutes at the end to answer them. We'll be getting started soon. This is our second presentation this year, and it's feeling like spring out there, so it's been fun.
I believe next month is companion plantings with hostas.
Yes, hosta companion plants. That'll be a good one. Somebody has a raised hand. So if you have any questions, you can just put them in the chat. I see someone has a raised hand, but
that's not going to work.
we'll give a minute here yet and let people get filing in. If you have some questions throughout the program, you can put them down in the chat or the Q&A and we'll answer them at the end. If you're having any listening problems, you can send me a little message in the chat and I'll try to help you. Okay, I think we're going to get started. I think we're ready. How do I turn off record? You won't be able to turn off the recording. It is automatically recorded. So, but they're not going to be recording you. You will not be on the recording. So you won't have to worry about that, Mary. That is one of our attendees who had a question. So this is being recorded so that it will be available later on YouTube. So if you have to leave early or something, it will be, or you want to review it, it will be on YouTube later this week, whenever I get it up there. Okay, I think we're ready to get started. Welcome everyone to Master Gardener Presents again. This is a monthly program that is going between February and June, here at Kimberly Library. And the person who's organizing this is here with me, Tom Wenzel, Outagamie County Master Gardeners Association.
Well, thank you for coming. And if you have any general gardening questions that you'd like a Master Gardener to answer, you can send us an email at gardenersos@outagamie.org. And we'll get back to you with an answer to your question. So today's topic is orchids in Wisconsin, native orchids. Richard and Nancy Baehnman have been part of the Northeast Wisconsin Orchid Society for a very long time, and they specialize in native orchids. And they've been involved in orchid rescues throughout Wisconsin, and they have a very nice native orchid selection in their backyard. And their backyard is in the middle of Appleton. So it's not like they're out in some specialized environment. So it's something that you can do also. So with that, I'll just turn it over to Richard and Nancy.
Hello. Can everybody hear me all right? First thing I want to do is thank my wife Nancy for putting most of this together. I mean, I did take a few of the pictures, but the bulk of the pictures she took, and she also put the presentation together. Without her, this wouldn't happen. So I just thought I'd like to thank her because I usually forget. Can we do our first slide?
There are some pictures in here of orchids that we have never seen personally. So I did rip some off from Go Orchids or from some Native Orchid Conference members.
Okay, the reason I put this up, orchids are different than other flowering plants. One of the big differences in your typical rose or lily, you have two separate structures, one with the pollen and then the other one has the ovary. Orchids are different. They have a structure called.
Richard, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I don't think you guys moved to your next slide. Did you want?
We did on the screen here.
Oh, it's not coming over this way. You are viewing Richard and Nancy's screen. I'm still seeing the first screen, the Orchids of Wisconsin.
Oh, no, this is
Okay, let's see what. So you on your screen, you're seeing something different. You're seeing the second one.
It's a drawing.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm not seeing that on this end. I'm seeing still your first slide. And I don't know why. Yeah, one of the other attendees said they're also seeing it. I wonder, do you have to do start slideshow? Is there a thing for that? It seems strange that we're not seeing. We are viewing your screen. Here's.
Maybe start from the beginning in the upper left.
Yeah, click on that maybe.
No, that's mute.
That's mute.
I don't know why you would be seeing something different on your screen.
Pause, would that be it? Take it off pause.
Resume slideshow. Something's changing. Okay, so try to go to the. Do you still see the second slide on your side?
Yes.
Yes.
Because I'm still seeing the first one. Could you try clicking on the second slide again or clicking the next to see if it changes?
Okay, now I'm showing a candidum.
No, that's not coming over either. Let's try. Let's see, what can I do? Let's stop other. Do you want to continue? Cancel. Let's try. Why don't you stop sharing and then share again? Like down on the bottom where you share screen. Maybe stop sharing and we'll pull it up again and see if it helps. And I apologize. We normally don't have these problems. Is there? Okay. Oh, now it went to the parts of the orchid flower.
Okay,
And Susan,
but you're seeing my whole screen probably.
no, I'm not. I'm only, no, I do see your whole screen. Yes. I don't see the slideshow part. Someone said, try going into slideshow mode. Where's that? Slideshow mode.
Well, we'll try broadcast slideshow.
Oh, we don't want that. No,
No.
don't do that. Well,
Do you see my screen now?
I see the parts of the orchid flower now. Now
Okay.
try to change. Okay, so try to change it again though, because I want to make sure that I don't have to interrupt you again.
Now, do you see the candidum?
No. I'm not.
Okay, I'm currently on the first screen again.
It's still showing the parts of the orchid flower.
Okay, so why is it not?
Someone said, click on the bottom right corner icon. The bottom right corner icon. on your screen. Click from current slide. Okay, see this? Do you see on the top there, there's from current slide? Oh, icon next to 60%. Huh. All right, I'm getting some help from the people watching here. Someone said, yeah, did you click on that from the beginning? Did it do anything?
I started from the beginning again.
I'd still see the parts of the orchid flower. Now, someone said next to the 60% on the bottom right, there's an icon. Does that do anything? Any of those? I'm still seeing the second thing.
No, that part I'm not getting at all. I'm just seeing my presentation.
Someone, I appreciate all the help you all are giving me. Someone asked if you have 2 monitors going.
Nope.
Oh, just the one. I wonder why it's not switching. So what is showing on your screen right now?
Right now I have my PowerPoint open.
Okay, and you have the parts of the orchid flower, is that the
Up to
picture?
the orchid flower.
Okay, now try to go to the next screen and let's see if it changes. Yeah, that worked. That's working.
Well, rather than doing it in presentation mode, we can just do it from PowerPoint.
We can do it. Let's do what works. All right, I'm seeing parts of an orchid flower now. I think that's what we're going to have to do to make this work.
All right.
And thank you for all of you helping and your patience.
Okay. Like I said, orchid flowers are different than other flowers. In your typical rose or lily, you have male and female parts. Okay. In an orchid, there's a structure called the column. It contains both the pollen and the stigmatic surface that leads to the ovaries. So that's one of the big things that makes orchids different. The other thing with orchids, usually several of the petals have fused and form a structure which gives you the things like the pouches, the landing pads, all kinds of interesting things that you won't find in a typical flower, a non-orchid flower. Okay, go ahead to the next one that gets pointed out. Okay, this is Cyprupedium Candidum. We did see this one in person. We were down south in Wisconsin. We were in a big riverbed. There was only a stream in the riverbed now. The rest of it's all just rocks and gravel. And there were probably hundreds of these growing down there. I'm not going to tell you where it is because I don't remember exactly. But it was really worth the trip to go all the way down there to see it. Okay. Here's another one. Okay, and this is one of the areas where you might actually find some. Okay, go ahead. Okay, this is, by the way, we're running these in kind of in the seasonal calendar. The first ones to come up will be the first ones we show, and then the later ones will be towards the fall. Okay, go ahead. Galliers spectable. When I've seen these growing, they're actually been growing like on a hillside where water is kind of running past them most of the time. So they're difficult to grow. Even if you have, you can actually buy them online, seed drawn, but they are difficult to grow. Okay, this is a dactyl Rhiza viridis. Most of Wisconsin orchids are not big, showy flowers like you would find on a lot of the tropical orchids. A lot of them are small green things, and this is one of them. Oh, Calypso Balboasa. I took this picture on Isle Royale. If you don't know where it is, it's in Lake Superior. It's really quite a unique experience to hike on the island. I've hiked it myself about 5 times. None of those times is recent, though, but I was much younger. But anyways, this is the Calypso Balboasa. There's a close-up of it. Again, you can see that the pouch is modified. That said, that's from 2 of the petals that have fused together to form that particular structure. The column is inside the lip. Go ahead. Bogs are great places to look for orchids. You only have to worry about mosquitoes being sucked into the ground if there's too much water, and of course wood ticks, things like that. But bogs are great places to go. Bogs are acidic, so you will find orchids that like acid in the soil. Go ahead. Now this is a Cypripedium parviflorum variety pubescens. Yeah, it's called the yellow lady slipper orchid. It's the small yellow lady slipper orchid. Pardon me.
That's the large.
Oh, I'm sorry, pubescens, yes, the hairy one is the large one. One of the things you might notice in this slide, the one on the left, if you look at those twisted petals on the side, yeah, those are modified sepals. And notice on the left that how brown they are, bronze. And then when you go over to the right-hand side, you can see that they're much more green. That's very typical. That makes their identification with some of the other orchids quite difficult because they do interbreed. Okay, on the left, you can see what a Cypripedium orchid looks like when it comes up in the spring. So if you're out hiking in the woods and you see these, try not to trample them.
Got a double there.
Yeah, and some of the orchids will be doubles. White cedar swamps are a great place to look. They tend to be a little more acid, and that's where you'll find some of the other orchids that we'll be coming up to shortly. Coral Rhizotrifida. Wisconsin has several coral rhiza orchids. The reason they're called coral rhiza is if you dig one up, the root structure looks like a piece of coral. These do not photosynthesize. The coral rhizas basically rely on decaying matter in the soil that's broken down by funguses. The orchids then steal what they need from the funguses. Now, this coral rhiza is not named. It's on Isle Royale. I can tell you where to find it. I don't know what kind it is because it's a variety. Typically, most of these should have a little bit green in them, even though they don't photosynthesize. This one's all yellow. So I don't know what kind it is. My first orchids that I saw in the wilderness, I was busy with young boys, keeping them out of trouble, and I didn't even know what orchids were. But when you're hiking through the woods, they really jump out at you. Okay, this is a Cypripedium macaulay. The flowers are quite large. You're going to find them in areas where the soil is very acid. You're looking at a pH of 4.5, 4, somewhere in there. These are really difficult to grow. You can buy them online, grown from seed, but they are very difficult. Some of the commercial growers actually add vinegar to their water when they water these things to keep the pH low enough for them. And you can see too on the Cypripedium macaulays, they go everywhere from in color from deep pink to white. And they can be very large bunches of them. This again was taken on Isle Royale, I believe. Mm-hmm. Okay, this is Cypripedium Arietynum. If you're going to go look for this thing, it's only about 4, maybe 5 inches high. Comes up early in the spring. A good place to see them is off of the boardwalk in the Ridges Wildlife Sanctuary. And again, you can see how the two petals have modified that lower lip and formed a pouch. Now, one thing about the pouch is part of the pollination routine for this plant. It's actually very attractive to some insects. They see the pouch, they may be attracted to it because they're looking for a place to hide, maybe they're cold, or maybe the plant is giving off a scent. They expect to find some kind of reward when they enter the pouch. I'll explain a little bit more. White cedar swamps, another good place to look for orchids. Okay, one of the things when you look at these, now this is Maccason. I have these growing in the backyard. Fortunately, when I put them in there, they liked what I did, and so most of them survived. But you can see how dark the sepals are on these. But you can also find Macacin where the sepals are quite green. What happens is these yellows all interbreed, and you may not be able to identify exactly which one it is, whether it's Cypripedium Macacin or whether it's Cypripedium pubescens or parviflorum, or maybe even the Candidum. So it's very hard sometimes to tell what you've got. They're quite pretty though. Okay, this is coral Rhiza striata. It's probably the most common coral Rhiza that we've run into. Go ahead. And again, they can be in very large groups, and they don't photosynthesize. This one especially, it's obvious that they're pink in color and there's no green at all. They don't photosynthesize. They rely on the fungus in the soil. Now, just stopping for a second, your typical orchid, as Tom pointed out earlier, the orchid seeds are like dust. They do not have any food in them. I mean, we eat lots of seeds ourselves, beans, peas, we eat lots of different seeds. And the reason we eat them is because they have a lot of sugars and carbohydrates in them. Orchid seeds don't have that. All they have is a seed coat and the endosperm, and that's it. So the only way that seed can survive is by landing in a place that has a suitable fungus growing. The fungus will invade the seed. The seed is used to being, it's programmed to accept the fungus, but it keeps the fungus from destroying it itself. And then once the fungus has gotten into the seed can then develop because it's basically going to steal what it needs from the fungus, and the fungus is getting it from the decaying matter in the soil. This is Myadia Cardata. If you're going to see one of these, you're going to be down on your hands and knees with a magnifying glass. You might be sitting in a puddle of water in a bog or something. They're very tiny, kind of hard to find.
There are two heart-shaped leaves about halfway up the stem. And when I'm looking for them, I look for those two tiny little heart-shaped leaves, which are the size of sesame seeds.
Yeah. Okay, this is a Spiranthis lucida. What can I say about it? When Spiranthis are not blooming, you cannot identify one from the other. There's actually just one you could, because it dies off before it flowers, but all the rest of these, they have that little rosette at the bottom of green leaves, and they all look the same until they flower. Fens are a great place to look for orchids. There's a Carney fen. It's actually in the upper peninsula of Michigan. We've been to the Carney fen once or twice. The state of Michigan does not mark these things off at all. So we've actually driven up there twice, not been able to find something as big as a fen because it's completely surrounded by woods. So, where do you hike in and get lost is the idea. My wife's a little afraid of being lost in the woods, and I don't blame her. So, but there's most of the orchids you find in the fen, you also find growing alongside the road. So, go ahead. This is another tiny little green thing. It's a Nyadia Harikulata. What can I say? You're going to be on your hands and knees looking for this thing. Okay, this is a plectrum high male. Excuse me. This is kind of an unusual orchid because it doesn't have any leaves in the summertime. It puts up leaves in the fall when the trees are losing their leaves. So then it gets maximum amount of light because it apparently likes to grow under trees. The leaves stay up and green all winter long. Now, most of the time they're under snow. Then in the spring, again, before the trees leave out, they can photosynthesize and gain enough energy. Then the leaves will die off, and then they'll flower in the spring. And then the whole cycle repeats. So it's quite an unusual orchid. Flowers are not spectacular or anything, but they are kind of cool. I did have these growing in the backyard at one time. but no longer. Platantra hookeri, you can see why it's called hookeri, because it's got that modified two petals at the bottom, and it kind of looks like it's got a hook, like it's going to grab you. Sandy jackbarren pines are a place also to find orchids. Okay, now this is Arathusa Balboasa. It's also, I think, called the dragon's mouth orchid. If you look at the lower part of the flower, that again is that modified lip, and right above it is the column. You may see a little yellow in there. That's not pollen. That is actually, there you go. That's a good picture of the yellow. That is not pollen. The pollen for that particular orchid, if you're looking at the yellow part in the middle and you go up to that, that next part of the flower that's hanging over it, that's covering up the column, which is right underneath that part of the flower. The column has the pollen, which comes in little packets. A lot of orchid pollen comes in packets. And many times the orchid pollen is actually covered up by what they call an anther cap. It actually sits on top of the pollen. It keeps the wrong pollinator from picking up the pollen. It also keeps rain and wind and stuff from knocking the pollen out of the flower. So the yellow is actually fake pollen. The insect, the pollinator, is flying overhead. He sees the pollen, which he sees something that he thinks is pollen, and he flies down to investigate. And then he, guess what, picks up the pollen on his back when he bumps into the anther cap, knocks it off, picks up the pollen. Okay, this is Galliers Rotundifola. This is actually very rare in Wisconsin, and we actually did see some. I can't tell you where it is because we almost were virtually blindfolded when they took us in to see it. I can tell you within about a 100-mile radius that it's, or a 10-mile radius, that it's up by Lakewood, Wisconsin. They loaded us up in cars and they drove us around in circles for quite a while. And then we stopped. We walked in a ways. We were on the backside of a lake. One side of the lake had, I think, it was developed a little bit. The other side was basically just wet forest. And there were a lot of these growing in there. Yeah, so they are there, but you have to know where they are. Liparis locellii. This, I think, is the one I had growing in the backyard. The squirrels got the last one last year, even though I had it in a wire cage. Maybe some will come up. Again, quite small. One of the things about this, do we have a side picture of it? If you look at the flowers, if you can see on the flowers, the modified lip is actually turned into a landing pad. It's quite, there's another Liparis in here. The landing pad is quite big, and it's basically there to entice the insect in. He can land on it, and then he can walk in and pick up the pollen. Okay, another Rhiza, Immaculata. Again, it's not hard to find because they do like a little extra light. So a lot of this stuff actually grows right along the trails when you're hiking. And some of the bunches can be quite large. Okay, this is a Platantra Obtusata. Let's go to the next one. Again, not very big. Okay, this is in the peninsula.
The ridges.
Yes, it's in Wisconsin's ridges. It's a nature preserve. It's well worth a trip. There are boardwalks everywhere, so you do not have to wade down into the swales. You won't get wet. There's a lot of orchids to be seen. Not as many as they used to have, and I don't really know why that is, but if you, the ridges is basically old sand dunes. So the wind would push up a sand dune, it would get occupied by trees and grasses and things, and then you'd have a low spot of swale, then another sand dune would get pushed up. And so these are the older sand dunes that are covered with trees. And there are a lot of different, carnivorous plants. There's a lot of really cool stuff up in the Ridges Nature Preserve. Okay, this is Liparis lilifolia, and you can see on this one how big the landing platform is. The big pink thing that's shaped like a banana pointing down. That's your landing pad. If you look up, you see a white structure. That's a little bit yellow. That's your pollen up there. So your insect is going to come in. He's going to drop onto that landing pad. He's going to move into the flower. One thing about orchids, they don't all offer a reward. They don't all offer nectar. Many times they fake it. They offer just enough clues, hints, attractants to whatever the pollinator is, that he will come in thinking he's going to get a reward. He won't get a reward, but in the process of looking for it, he will pick up the pollen and then move on to the next flower and deliver the pollen. This is Platantra Arietynum. Again, not very big. It's another Platantra Arietynum. Platantra Aquilone. I've never seen this one, as far as I know. Go ahead.
The last two Platanthras both had been misidentified as Hyperborea. So it was just through DNA analysis that they realized that they were actually two different species, and then they've since split them up. So
Yeah.
I think we might have seen them, but it was when we thought that they were
Something
Arietynum.
Yeah, that's one of the things you're going to discover with orchids is that a lot of them look alike. And unless you're really an expert, you're not going to tell one from the other. Okay, though, this is a Ridge's swale. You get there at the right, if you're into watching birds, there's a lot of birds up there. And as I said, there's a lot of wildlife. Okay, this is a Platantra Flava variety, Herbolia. Again, you're going to find it growing with, I think that's a scouring rush that's growing with it, probably some grasses. Again, this one's going to be probably 6 or 8 inches tall. A little bit easier to find. And this is Malaxis. This one is really tiny. You just have a single leaf poking up, maybe out of a hump of sphagnum growing in a swamp somewhere, and with these microscopic flowers on it. They're probably not much, maybe a millimeter in in width. Okay, this is Calipogon Tuberosa. Okay, this is one of my favorite Wisconsin orchids. It likes to grow basically full sun. One of the things I like about it, it has a trick. Orchids are pretty particular about their pollinators, okay? And they have, one of the things about the pouches, it limits the size of the insect that can actually enter the pouch. In those pouches, if you're the right size insect, you are trapped actually in the pouch once you land in it. Now, if you look into the flower, you're going to find some little red dots, and that is it's kind of a marker for the way out for the insect. They see the red dots, they follow it, and what they do literally is they crawl up the backside of the flower behind the column. Now, in a lot of your slipper orchids, the pollen it's not in a pouch. It's just a clump on the back of the column. When the insect crawls through the flower, this smears onto his back. When he goes to the next flower then and repeats the same process, he will then smear the pollen onto the ovaries. Now, what's interesting about these, if you look at the flower on the left-hand side, you see some things up there that looks maybe like it's pollen because it's yellow, and it's got some little appendages which look like they could be the part of the anther, but it's fake. So if you look in the lower flower, you can see that the wrong insect is on this flower. For one thing, he landed on the fake pollen, but he bent over the structure with the column on it, or with part of the column on it. He's too big. And that's how this one of the ways that this insect, this orchid, makes sure it gets the right pollinator. So the pollen, if you go back to the flower on the left, you see that little banana-shaped structure coming out of the bottom there. On the tip of that, that's where the pollen is. So what you're going to do is, you're an insect, you fly in, you land on the fake pollen. If you weigh the right amount, you're probably the right pollinator. There's a hinge at the bottom of that structure, and then it allows the insect to fall backwards, and his back will then crash into where the pollen is really located, and then it will stick on his back, and then he can fly off and do the whole thing over again. So basically the Calipogon almost has like a scale built into it. Okay, go ahead. If you want to see Calipogons tuberosas, if you go to the Rhiza sanctuary, you get out of the sanctuary, you cross the road and you go to the beach. There's a lot of them growing in the beach. And this happens to be a white version, an alba version of the tuberosas. Okay, this is Plutanta Orbiculara. When you see it in the woods, you're going to know what it is because the leaves get, this is, there we go. The leaves will actually drop down on top of the ground. So you have these twin leaves and they're flat to the ground. I don't think there's really any other plants around here that do that.
Sometimes it's called the dinner plate orchid.
Yeah, and you find them also in Peninsula State Park, not in the beaches, but into the woody areas. Okay, this is Cypripedium Reginai. It is Wisconsin's largest orchid. It's bigger than most tropical orchids when it's flowering. It also has the pouch. The pollinator is probably some kind of a bee. I don't remember which one. There used to be hundreds of these growing along Ridges Road, which is just outside of the
Nature sanctuary.
thanks.
Yeah, if you walk from Ridges where they have the two lighthouses that line up and you take the road and go towards Tuft Point, it used to be along that road. It was just covered with all kinds of lady slippers.
And these will bloom a couple of weeks later than the yellow lady slippers. They used to grow side by side on the road. There were just, like I said, hundreds of them. And you typically would see the yellows, and then if you came back in a couple of weeks, you would see the Reginas blooming. We were there one time when the weather was a little weird, and actually the yellows and the Reginas were actually blooming at the same time. So there's a possibility that they could have cross-pollinated naturally. But
Typically, we start looking for the yellows around Memorial Day. The Reginas generally start around the middle of June.
okay, this is Pagonia Ophioglossoides. How do you like that one? I got it pronounced right. Okay, this Pagonia, this can be found in the Carney Fen, actually. We saw it alongside the road growing outside of these. You get these raised areas in the sweat areas. I think it's a combination of grass and sphagnum moss, and the orchids have taken root in that. So they like it wet, but they don't want to be sitting in the water. Again, when they're flowering, they're quite easy to spot because there isn't a lot around them. Platantra dilatata. What can I say? It's another one of those little green ones. Okay, now this is Platantra dilatata. It's also called the candle orchid. If you're in a bog, and hopefully there's a trail you can walk on or a boardwalk so you're not slogging through the water, this thing will be like 2 feet high. And when it's flowering, you can't miss it. Even if it's a way off into the swamp, you really can't miss these things. Because there's hundreds of flowers on them, and they do kind of look like a big white candle. Okay, this is, we're in a fen looking for something.
Dilatatas.
Dilatatas, yeah. Okay, this is Epipactus Halliburine. This is actually an invasive species according to the state of Wisconsin. And I guess when you do get into some of the county parks, you will see probably thousands of these. They really don't crowd anything out. So I don't know how, I mean, I have some coming up in the backyard and I don't really worry about them too much. If you pull them up once, they're done. They're not like a dandelion where they'll keep coming back. The few that come up in the grass, you hit them with the lawnmower once and they're gone. I have a few that come up in the beds with my Cypripediums, and you know, they really don't get out of hand. In fact, many times before they flower, they die off. And I don't know if there's some kind of fungus or something that they don't like, but they're not particularly hardy. They come up, but they said they do many times die off before they flower. Another Platantra Lucera. You can look at the flower and you can see that it's quite lacy, and of course that's why they call it Lucera. This is Malaxis unifolia. You can see that it likes to grow in the forest. I don't want to call it forest soil, but all the dead leaves and things. The flowers again are microscopic. Malaxis unifolia. Myadia, I'm not even going to try that one. Sorry. Another small green thing that grows out there in the woods. Go ahead. Platantra Lucofea. These are quite tall. You're going to find them growing in a wet grassland area, as long as the grass isn't too tall. And again, they're quite easy to see. You can see that that lip is modified into those three filly, almost hand-like things. So again, quite easy to see once they're there. Okay, go ahead.
That's a different one.
Oh,
Lucofea.
yeah, that's the same.
That's the same one.
Yeah. Okay, this is Platantra cycodes. It's a purple fringed orchid. These can get to be 2 feet tall, and when they're in bloom, you can't miss them. We went up to the ridges one day with a friend of ours, and we're going through all the back areas that the ridges have because they inherited some old farmland from someone. And we spent hours and hours walking through this, risking breaking our legs because the furrows are still there. So you're walking through all these furrows. Didn't find any. So we went out to the road to walk back to our cars, and there was one coming up in the gravel next to the road. So they're up there. You just have to know where to find them. Spiranthis Lucera. Platantra clavellata. It's another small green thing. Probably 1/2 foot tall. Again, when it's flowering, you'll spot it. And it likes boggy areas. So, and it does like to be out in the open more than some of the other orchids. Okay, this is a Goodyear. Wisconsin has several Goodyears. You can spot them pretty easily by their foliage. It's very colorful, much more colorful than the flowers. The flower will be a stem coming out of that rosette out of the middle, and they're small white flowers. Rabbits like to eat them. You can see the one on the left that's growing in sphagnum moss. That was actually one I got some seedlings from someone, and so I grew them in pots for a while. I do have a couple in the backyard. I'm hoping they'll keep coming back every year. This is another Goodyear. Now, if you look on the right-hand side, you can see my big fat hand. The whole plant is probably about the size of a quarter. So, Goodyear repens. I think there's foliage on the next slide.
It's at the bottom here.
No. Again, Goodyear repens. The foliage will tell you what plant it is. Goodyear Teslata. Have we ever seen this one? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I don't think we've seen this one growing wild. Again, and with a lot of these, if you couldn't tell what it was from the leaves, many times the flowers themselves will be arranged on the flower spike in a particular way, and then you could identify them. Goodyear oblongifolia. And that's what the foliage looks like with that one. Again, it's going to be out on the forest floor where it gets a little bit of light. The leaves are pretty easy to spot. One of the things that Goodyears like to do is they will send out runners, and they'll travel underneath the leaf litter, and then another orchid will pop up nearby. Of course, they do set seeds, but they have another method which works also well for them. Spiranthis Zafiana. You can see how the flowers are arranged on this one. This was taken in my backyard, a picture. No, I don't have these anymore. Wish I did. Spiranthis casei. There was a science teacher in Wisconsin. His name was
Michigan.
Michigan, excuse me. Bill
Fred Case.
Fred Case. He wrote a book about the Wisconsin orchids.
Orchids of the Great Lakes region.
And this one is named after him. He discovered it. So there are new orchids to be discovered out there all the time. The reason this one's different than others is it has a little, not only the shape of the flower and everything, but there's a little yellow mark on the throat of the inside of the flower. So really hard to see the yellow in this one.
This one's Cernua.
Okay, this is Cernua. This is a big yellow, a big Spiranthis. Pretty easy to see, actually. This is the one I've got growing in the backyard.
Mhm.
Yeah. Coral Rhiza, another one of those saprophytes. This one's full of seed pods. There's a good possibility that it's self-pollinating. If a pollinator doesn't come along, a lot of orchids will self-pollinate just as an added survival method. Okay, I'm guessing I'll never see this one growing in the wild in Wisconsin. This is Trifora Trianthrophora. The reason is it is tuned to the weather, and you need a lot of rain, and then apparently like 10 days later they'll come up and flower. So you literally have to watch them day by day. You have to know where they are, and then you just have to keep watching. Some people will drive hundreds of miles when they know that these things are going to flower.
The flowers open in the morning and they're done by mid-afternoon.
Yeah. So this is Spiranthis Magna Camphora. This is the one. A lot of these, Spiranthis will grow alongside the road in some of your country areas. The problem is, when the road crews come through, they may just whack everything down. So that's always a problem. Spiranthis Ovalis. I've never seen this one growing. You never know, maybe. Spiranthis Oklahoma. Again, another one I've never seen growing in the wild.
That's when somebody just recently found and said, oh, they grow in Wisconsin.
Yeah. Spiranthis vernalis, another small, again, if the grass isn't too tall, these things will stand out. There's usually more than one. A lot of Spiranthis can form large colonies. Okay, this is Calipogon Oklahomensis. We looked at Calipogons before. This one is a variety mostly found in Oklahoma, but it's been moving this way probably since the last glacier moved out. And so we do have this one in Wisconsin. For some of them, the only way you could tell the difference is you dig them up and you look at the corm, and apparently they're different between the different varieties. Okay, the Wisconsin orchids, we're almost done. Wisconsin orchids do hybridize. And this is Cypripedium, and the X means that it's a hybrid. It's Candidum, which is the white one we saw first, and Parviflorum macacin. So it's the white and one of the yellows that hybridized, and this is what happens. And then this one is Candidum by Parviflorum variety pubescens. And this is Candidum by Andrewsii. So there are hybrids, and wow.
Yeah, I couldn't find a picture of the natural hybrid with Regina.
Wow, that's weird.
Yeah.
Okay, and then here's another hybrid. It's Platantra Lucofea by Lacera. And then here's some other natural hybrids. No pictures available, which is very strange. You'd think if you found one of these, you would take pictures. There's an opportunity for some of you if you want to do that. Okay, you can buy orchids you can buy native orchids online. There are a few vendors that handle this. We're going to go through the names of the orchids vendors, and if you need more information, feel free to contact me. Spangle Creek Labs, he actually does the growing of the orchid seeds. I might as well explain a little bit about what goes on with orchid seeds. Because the seeds are so small, they need the fungus to provide them with the nutrients, the proteins, the carbohydrates, the sugars that they need to grow into a plant. Well, about 100 years ago, someone figured out with orchids that you could fake it. You could actually take the seeds from an orchid, you could sterilize the outside of the seed, and then you could sow it on a medium, an agar medium, which would substitute for the actual funguses. Now, this has to be done in a sterile environment. So if any of you work in a hospital or someplace, you might be, or a laboratory, you might be somewhat familiar with how that's done. I do a little bit of it here at the house. Terrestrials are really hard. But anyways, so Spangle Creek Labs does that. And if you're thinking of buying orchids this year, you're probably too late. If you see somebody that has orchids that you want to try and grow, shoot for next year, because they grow only a limited amount and they all manage to sell out. Okay, go ahead. And here's a couple other places where you might be able to find orchids. The Carnivorous Plant Nursery, Gardens at Post Hill. Gardens at Post Hill, they usually had huge inventory, and they had a lot of hybrids. We'll be getting to those in a minute. They've really gotten smaller lately, and I don't really know why.
They moved from Connecticut to Washington State.
Yeah, I know, but I don't still understand.
Yeah.
And then there's Gardens at Blue Ridge. Okay, go ahead to the next slide. And then there's Itasca Lady Slipper Farm. Bad news about Itasca Lady Slipper Farm. They're in Minnesota. They used to get seedlings from the place we just looked at,
Spangle Creek.
Spangle Creek Lab. And they would take the Spangle Creek Labs, Spangle Creek Labs would sow seeds just for them. And then the Itasca Lady Slipper Farm would then grow them into blooming sized plants, which you could buy. And they were pretty reasonable, actually. But for some reason, it seems like they're getting out of the business. So, and then of course there's Izell plants. They don't sell anything really showy. The Plectrum, Goodyear, Spiranthis, Tipularia, which is not native. But go ahead, slip to the next one. And here's a couple others. Raising Rarities, Roberts Flower Supply. I've dealt with Roberts. They have good material. Their prices are somewhat reasonable. When I say reasonable, one thing you have to realize, raising orchids is not like raising tomatoes. When you sow an orchid seed, it may not turn green. It may not do anything green for a couple of years. A little corm is going to form. It's going to be a little white thing. And in Wisconsin, they may sit in the ground for 2 or 3 years before it sends up a green shoot. And that green shoot's only going to be an inch or so high. When you're looking at a flowering sized Regina, Cypripedium Regina, which can get to be maybe 18 inches high, that might be 10 years. So you're paying for this guy to sow the seeds, raise the seeds. Minimum for like a yellow would be probably 5 to 7 years. So it's almost like growing trees. It takes a long time for them to get to flowering size. So that's why when you see the prices, don't be shocked. Okay, good. Just a suggestion here. If you see a nice, cool orchid growing alongside the road, try not to dig it up or step on it. However, if the orchids are growing on your property, you can do whatever you like to them. If you're up north and you're going to build a cabin, I would suggest if there's orchids in the way, just move them over to the side, move them out of the way, out of the construction area. If your neighbors or friends are also doing some kind of construction or something, again, feel free to move them. Movement would be the best time to do that would be very early in spring. So you'd have to mark them the previous fall, or very late in the growing season after they've died back. Those would probably be the best times to move them. Okay, and I think that's the end of the presentation. We didn't have any. One other thing you'll find online. Some people have started hybridizing Wisconsin slipper orchids with Chinese slipper orchids. And they've been quite successful with that.
Robert's Flower Supply does some of that.
Okay.
And Roberts supposedly has some orchids available that he'll be shipping in March. So if you'd be interested in trying something, I would suggest getting to their website real fast.
Yes, another thing about growing orchids in your backyard, if you plunk them into the ground next to your tomatoes, they aren't going to make it. Many orchids are niche orchids. They only grow in certain places, like the grass pinks that we looked at. They like sandy soil. Most people here do not have sandy soil. Calipogons, they also like sandy soil. You many times will find them growing next to the grass pinks. So you're looking at a wet sandy area where they get a fair amount of light. So same thing with Cypripediums. They really seem to like good drainage. I think they're more tolerant of what's in the soil, okay, as long as they have good drainage. And typically the Cypripediums, they do like some shade. We did one of our rescues quite a few years ago, and there was an area that had been, it used to be part of really old Highway 41. And then it was cut off when they put Highway 41 in. So you had this little oxbow of a highway, and there were just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of yellow lady slippers growing there. And we moved a lot of them around. Some went to the zoo up by Green Bay. There's a lot of them planted all over. Some of the nature preserves got some. But it was very strange because when you got to this road, which basically pointed north and south, we found 99% of the orchids on the east side. I'm not sure why that is exactly, but it had to be just the right amount of light. Eventually, we did find a few smaller plants on the west, on the left side of the road, on the western side of the road. But so they are kind of fussy about where they get their light. Maybe it's just because it was cooler. Okay, I think that's it. Questions?
Yes, if anyone has questions, you can put them in the Q&A or the chat. We have one so far. It's, what is a fen?
A fen. Okay, a fen is actually a slow-moving river. If you, okay, you might go out and you're going to see this wet, grassy field, all right? And maybe there's trees around it. But to make it a fen, you're going to discover that there's water flowing into the fen. But unlike a bog where it stops dead, in the fen, the water actually keeps flowing right through. So in the Carney fen is surrounded by roads. And you can actually see this, that when it rains really heavy, the water hits the fen and then it just flows out of the fen. There's another fen down south in Wisconsin. It's called the Cedarburg Bog, but it's actually a fen, even though they call it a bog. The people who are studying it up there discovered that, yes, the water does flow into this thing and it flows out. So that makes it a fen.
Fens tend to be less acidic than,
Yes.
than the bogs.
Oh,
Bog is a closed community.
oh, interesting. I'm not seeing any other questions. You must have explained everything so perfectly that nobody has any questions and they're
Sure,
out.
they all fell asleep, I understand.
Well, one comment that I have, if I remember back a while, the Wisconsin has what, 50 some orchid varieties?
It depends
Somewhere.
on how you count them.
Yes, if you start counting hybrids and
Yeah.
varieties and things like that, it's 50,
How many would you find in Hawaii?
Three. That's because Hawaii's out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. The three orchids they have are very small, not very colorful. Most of the orchids you see in Hawaii were brought there from other places. So Hawaii is not the tropical paradise for orchids. In fact, the three native orchids in Hawaii are endangered, quite a bit endangered, because animals like to eat them. So, but yeah, there's only 3 varieties in Hawaii.
And they're small.
Yes.
That really surprises me. Wow. That's cool.
Well, I will interject here a little bit. If you have any questions about orchids that you'd like some follow-up on, you can send those to GardnerSOS@outagamey.org, and I'll put you in touch with Richard and Nancy, and we'll get your questions taken care of.
All right, there you go. Oh, there is a question here. Does the genus signify a specific type of orchid?
Yeah, when you're labeling orchids, there's a whole chart. Orchids, I think, evolved from asparagus along like 70 or 120 million years ago. Yeah, when you're labeling anything, any plant, animal, the genus is the larger family. So like with Platanthras, the Platanthera is the genus, and then the species are the second name on that plant. And the reason they do that is because they've grouped those together. They put them all in the same genus because they're very similar. They're not the same, but they're different enough that then you put them into this genus, and then you give them their own species name. So I don't know if that answered your question, but.
That looks like all the questions. Well, thank you very much. I'm very proud of our state that we have all these beautiful orchids, and you gave some good ideas on how to hunt them out in nature. It sounds a little wet.
Many times.
Many times.
Well, we don't have any more questions. Thank you all for coming. Again, this recording is going to be on YouTube later this week. And we'll see you next month for we're going to have companion plants for hosta gardening.
Thank you.
Thank you.